everybody. I hope you had a good weekend. I'd like to take a look, just a review of what happened last week in those program models. This is a really important week that we just finished up. So I'd like to just take a look at sort of the goal of each of those different program models that we saw in Chapter 7. So first of all, a couple of questions that is important to ask ourselves. First of all is, what is the goal of the model? And also, who are the students that are being served in the model that we're looking at? So first of all, as some of you mentioned in your video responses on Flipgrid, the goal of the model can either be additive or subtractive. So additive being that we're looking at adding English to the language that they already speak, or adding a new language to English if English is their first language. Also, the goal could be learning English versus becoming bilingual, bicultural. So those are kind of two different goals. The goal could be transitioning into English, such as in an ESL program or sort of a sink or swim type of model, versus supporting English learning with what they already know in their home language. And then, of course, some of those programs, they really have the goal of supporting academic growth in that home language, in addition to also supporting academic growth in English. So those are some things to ask yourself as you're looking at what is this program that I'm looking at? What is the goal of the program? Also, a question to ask yourself is, who are the students that are being served by this program? So are they English learners only? Are they heritage language groups only, or are they some type of mix? And so I realize that some of you are saying to yourself when you watched that video last week, these were only Chinese speaking students, or I heard that teacher say that there were some other students in the classroom. I didn't quite see them in the video. In the book, it talks about there being a 50-50 mix sometimes that mix not being quite so clear because we have students coming from home language groups that already speak two languages at home. And so sometimes it's a little bit difficult to decipher who the mix of students are in a classroom. But who is it that's being served by a program is an important question to ask yourself when you're looking at that program model. So what is it that exactly was happening in that video? I heard a lot of different interesting thoughts. I had some emails that were shot to me last week saying, I'm kind of confused, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. So those are great things to be asking yourself. First of all, before I answer this question, please know that I didn't take off points if you feel like you got it wrong or you weren't quite sure what that model was. The important thing was to be asking yourself these questions. And taking a look at what was happening in that classroom. So first of all, we did hear the teacher say at the very beginning that 85% of the students in her classroom approximately were from Chinese families, and that usually little or no English was spoken at home. That was an important thing to note. We didn't necessarily see that other 15% of the students in the classroom. I mentioned that in my responses to some of you on the Flipgrid. And, that's a video that's taken in the classroom. So the goal, though, that she did mention was that the goal in the classroom was to learn English while also supporting a continued growth of home language and culture. So that was really important. The goal was not just to learn English at the expense of their home language. So they weren't forgetting their home language and culture. They were adding both. So it was definitely an additive nature. Language was a resource in that classroom. We definitely saw some translanguaging strategies used. We saw connections being made between the two languages, and so that was an important thing to have noticed in that video. It was important to note that we definitely heard the English portion of instruction in this classroom. We heard some support from Chinese, but I want to note that a lot of you made the connection that you think that this was a developmental bilingual education classroom, a DBE. I would tell you that I do not think that this was a DBE model, because in a developmental bilingual classroom, we typically see that about 90% of instruction is happening in their home language in the beginning years. So this was a pre-K classroom, and I would say that 90% of the instruction was not happening in Chinese in this classroom. And so that was kind of my hint that this was probably not a DBE model. However, DBE is very similar to what we call a dual language model. And so what it is that a DBE model is very similar to what we call a dual language model, a 90-10 dual language model. So I want to take a look at the difference between those two programs. And this is really important here in El Paso because we have a lot of schools that have gone with a dual language model, a lot of districts that have, but there's a difference between some of the models. So there's a one-way model of dual language and there's a two-way model. And so a lot of you mentioned that you thought it was a developmental model because all of the students were Chinese in that classroom. There is a one-way dual language model, and one way being that all of the students in that classroom are from the same home language group. And we have that happen a lot here in El Paso because we have almost all of the students in that classroom being emergent bilingual students whose home language is Spanish. That happens a lot of times here. We also have a two-way dual language model in which about half of the students are from one home language group and about half are from the other. So in our case, here in El Paso, half of the students would be Spanish speaking at home and half of the students would be English speaking at home. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you get a 60-40 mix or a 70-30 mix, but it's a mix. Now, when we talk about a 50-50 versus a 90-10 model, these come from your book. Sorry that they're not very great pictures that I took with my cell phone, but this is what it looks like in your book. And so what it is that a 50-50 model is that you start in the program having about half of your instructional day be in the home language and about half of it be in English, and you continue that way throughout the program. Whereas in a 90-10 model, which is similar to a DBE model that some of you mentioned, you start in that program where 90% of your instructional day is in the home language. And about 10% is in English. And as you move through the program, as you move up in grade levels, that percentage shifts until you get to 5th or 6th grade, where you're at about a 50-50. And there's a lot of reasons for that I won't go into right now. A lot of it has to do with literacy development, but that looks more similar to a DBE model. And so I appreciated a lot of the ways that you looked at this, and there were a lot of great comments on the Flipgrid this week. So just to kind of looking at who does the model serve and what are the purposes, both the content and language purposes of that model. So great discussion this week, you guys. I'm really looking forward to listening to your PSAs this week, so make sure that you get together with your group and you're getting that work done. If you have any questions about that, please do let me know. Send me an email early in the week so you can get that work done. And have a great week, everybody.